Jacques Talk is sponsored by Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan Injury Attorneys.
Hey, good morning, Jacques. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm talking to Garth Brooks.
Entering his second year as the LSU head football coach.
It was the only way I could get a foot in the door.
Joined by the icon, Kim Mulkey. Ace Coach, great to see you. Well, there are a few people that have covered LSU football longer than Scott Rabalais. He has been a writer covering the Tigers since 1992, which I remember is the worst season in LSU history, 2-9. Sorry, Scott.
It was quite an introduction, yes.
It had nothing to do with Scott, of course. We have nothing to do with LSU winning or losing. But fans sometimes want us to ask questions more times than others. And lately they want, I think that some of us want us to just throw like rotten, fruit at the head coach.
Sometimes, a lot of times, Jacques, after LSU loses or if they're on a losing streak or something like that, I feel like I have to be the voice of reason to a certain extent. Because I think a lot of people, every time the team punts, they want someone fired, But you can't do that. But there are a lot of questions and a lot of questions to ask and a lot of questions to answer about LSU football these days, despite the fact that all their goals still are in front of them. They can achieve anything they want to this season. But obviously, it hasn't looked like a very smooth operation, especially on offense so far.
Scott has not only covered LSU, he's written some great books on the Tigers, and the history of this pretty through and through. And I think that's the deal, right? When they win, the temptation is to maybe throw a parade and maybe get too buddy-buddy with the people that you're covering. At the same time, when they lose, be careful not to overdo it and crucify too many people, because typically it's going to swing back one way or the other. They're either going to go on a winning streak perhaps when you were bad talking them, and they're going to maybe lose a few when they're a little too high. But we could see through the 4-0 start there were blemishes with the team. And against Ole Miss, Scott, it was time to take the homecoming picture, and the pimples were out, So couldn't cover it up with makeup in Oxford.
No, and you had two earlier games against Clemson and Florida where you're like, well, these are big tests as well. They turned out not to be the games we thought they would be, obviously. You got to see how teams play and how they turn out, and obviously those two teams have struggled through the early part of the season. So this became the biggest test. Ole Miss, where before the season, you're like, well, if you thought, well, they're gonna play the backup quarterback. This guy from Division II. LSU's going to waltz in there and get a win, and that wasn't the case. Trinidad Chambliss was as good as advertised, and LSU lost the game with some of the same old problems. I thought the fact that the defense held them to 24 points, held Ole Miss to 24, was reasonable, even though they gave up a lot of yards. But the offense did not produce enough, and that's been the case throughout much of the season. 17 points at Clemson. Could have been 27 easily. They kick a field goal, and they get the Barry Brown touchdown. Only 13 offensive points against Florida, obviously. La Tech, not a very good performance. And then Saturday, some good points and bad points. And yet, if they could have gotten a stop with 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, they had a chance to get the ball back and go down there and get a touchdown and win the game, steal the game, but nonetheless. So, but that wouldn't change the fact that there are issues. Even if they'd done that, wouldn't change the fact that there are issues with this team, with this offense.
Yeah, well, the last time LSU went to Oxford in 2023, they gave up 55 points. They gave up 700. I looked it up. I remembered the 55 points, but the 704 yards, I think it was 706, whatever. It's over 700. So the question was, LSU in that same game scored 49 offensively. Could they score half of that? And they couldn't. So I think you put it well in your article, whack-a-mole, 2023, they've got a record-setting offense. They can score on anybody, and their defense is horrifically bad, historically bad. And now going into this year, it's like, well, can the defense just improve? Well, now they've got a pretty stellar defense. And, yeah, to your point, to go to Ole Miss against a Lane Kiffin offense and only give up 24 points when your offense is not staying on the field and your defense, Brian Kelly after the game said we weren't tired. I think that they naturally got a big gassed.
Sure, yeah, no question.
50 plays Ole Miss had in the first half. LSU had 24.
Right.
So I think I think Ole Miss had 3 points the first 5 possessions total. Now I think LSU they forced a fumble. Ole Miss about to score. They stripped the guy before the goal line. They got that turnover. So I think your defense pretty much did all they could do to an extent.
I agree.
Yeah, but the offense didn't, as Coach Kelly has said, play complementary football.
Yeah, and complementary football within complementary football, the passing game, despite whatever's ailing Garrett Nussmeier, he's been fairly functional. So I wrote, the running game can't run. He's having a hard time even walking. 57 yards net with including the sack of Nussmeier against a team that's given up over 190 yards per game on the ground. They blew out Tulane the week before, but Tulane had like 3 times as many yards rushing against Ole Miss, and that's playing coming from behind, playing from behind a lot of the game. So that complementary part is LSU's biggest struggle, because Nussmeier is still he's still serviceable. He's not like, oh, you got to take him out for Michael Van Buren or something like that. No, nothing like that. But they just can't get the running game going, and because that team's Jock is so funny. We're sitting here where 10 years ago, if we were doing this, we'd be talking about the passing game can't complement the running game under Les Miles. Right. It's like, well, they can run the ball. They're running into these teams are loading up the box just to stop Leonard Fournette or whoever, and it's making it difficult to run if they could only just pass the ball decently. Well, now it's the reverse of that. They can't run the ball decently, and I think there's a lot of things you could point to. I don't think it's just one thing or one coach or one player. A lot of things you can point to, and they're making it hard for the passing game that couldn't. Ole Miss is dropping 7-8 in the coverage. It makes it very difficult. Yeah,
it floods the secondary for your quarterback trying to find somebody who's open. You don't possess the ball. You don't give your defense a break. Caden Durham didn't play. He's your leading rusher, but I don't think anyone says, hey, if Caden Durham plays, we win, because in the games,
I agree. I don't think
in the games he did play, he averaged 4 yards a carry. He had 217 yards, and I know some people say, I hate it when you say that, but if you take away the first play of the season at Clemson, he stood up, he gets out, he's 24 yards on that one, and then the one against Florida late. You only need one, Scott, right?
That's all you need.
That's all you need.
That's all you need.
Sorry, bad impressions here. But the 51-yarder against Florida, I mean, you take away those 2 plays, and really he didn't get much on the ground either.
That's not the issue. It's the consistent running for, getting 5 or 6 yards, putting the offense in a position to where it's 2nd and 3. It's 3rd and 2. They face so many 3rd and longs, Jacques, this offense. We had an article in the
Koki did a nice article. I read it
about how LSU was one of the very best teams in the country on 3rd down conversions last year. This year they're under 30%. Well, they've been in these 3rd and long situations a lot. Why is that? Well, a lot of times it's because the running game is not getting anything to help them out on 1st and 2nd down. So it's easy to see what the problem is. Fixing it is not so easy.
Yeah, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. That's not where you want to be. And I just watched some of the highlights of the LSU Ole Miss game. Nussmeier threw the ball better than I remembered it watching it live. I think the things that really strike people are his inability to throw the ball down the field, because we know from day one the thing about Garrett Nussmeier is he can make any throw. He's got the arm strength. Look at the game last year against Oklahoma. He hit the 2 long ones to Chris Hilton. And so far this year, Chris Hilton has 4 catches for 30 yards with a long of 11. He's been healthy. That's been we can't get Chris Hilton healthy. Well, he's healthy, and now they can't get him the ball.
That's right.
So that's disappointing. And I thought of it. A lot of people have thought of it. It's kind of like the end of the Drew Brees era in New Orleans, in which he was pretty good 20 yards and in, but when it came to, hey, throw it deep, 40, 50 yards, defense start cheating. Hey, you can't throw it that deep, so let's start cheating up. So they got 2 weeks to get Nussmeier healthy and do whatever they can with him before South Carolina, whatever this injury is. Coach Kelly said it's ridiculous. There's been rumors that he needed surgery. Nussmeier needed surgery. Kelly says that's ridiculous, rumors, not true. So, all right, I don't know where my landing point is there, Scott, but
well, and like let me go back and criticize myself a little bit. I said going into the Southeastern game, there were a lot of people saying, just rest him in that game, rest him for Ole Miss. And I wrote, no, they need the work, they need the continuity, the chemistry on offense. Obviously, that's not working. And he looked very good against Southeastern. against an FCS opponent, obviously, not an Ole Miss on the road, but he looked good. He was making the throws. He looked pretty sharp. And then in this game again, he kind of reverted to two things. One, like you said, another example, a big play for LSU. The first drive, the 50-yard pass to Xavier Thomas, but it was underthrown. Mm-hmm. He comes back to get the ball. The defensive back's momentum's carrying him farther away, and he runs around him and makes a big gain and sets up their first touchdown. The pass to Chris Hilton in the third quarter, where he was open by about 7 yards, finding a defensive back. Yeah. Nussmeier underthrows him, incomplete pass to settle for a field goal, and of course the interception he threw into triple coverage. That's been a Garrett trait throughout his career, just thinking I can get the ball into this hole right here, and it doesn't always work out that way. And that they had momentum. That was a chance. That's really where the game turned to me. LSU's up 7-3. They drive down there and go up double digits on Ole Miss. Yeah, it might be a very different game indeed, and that's where things kind of turn for him. So it's a mystery. What's wrong with him? Brian Kelly has asked two questions after the game, including your question, right? About his arm strength or velocity, and he dodged both of them. And then Garrett says, "I don't want to talk about it." Well, as they said in All the President's Men, that's a non-denial denial, and that's that tells you, in absence of any other evidence, that there is something wrong with him, and they got to get it right. And I don't think we'll get a straight answer or really know if he's right. Kelly said again on the teleconference Wednesday morning, "Hey, he's on he's an ab injury, but he's feeling better, but they're limiting him. He's not going to throw 100 times in practice, doing a lot of film work and stuff like that." And we won't really know until we see him on the field against South Carolina on October 11th.
Well, that's what kind of makes Brian Kelly's post-game comments interesting to me. He says they hit some deep ones down the field. We didn't hit any deep passes down the field. Well, your quarterback can't reach. I mean, you're watching the game, right, Coach? I mean, you can see it. I mean, is it bad? What's Skip Bertman, "Ooh, it's not your fault. It's my fault for thinking you could play here." You can't ask a kid something he can't do. Right. And so, let me say, going back to, you saw at the start of preseason camp, he looked tremendous. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was throwing balls over defensive backs and he was dropping them in the bucket and had a lot of arm strength. I remember telling Koki or Reed, who didn't cover, neither of them were on the beat in 2019. I said, you want to know what Joe Burrow looked like? Pretty much. That's pretty much what it was. I mean, he looked to great. And then something happened, of course, that last scrimmage before the Clemson game. He's rolling the ball. It was almost comical. He's rolling the ball instead of throwing any kind of pass, just a little soft toss, nothing. Yeah. So obviously something happened along the way in camp, and they've admitted that. Hey, I'm not saying they're obfuscating everything about it, but we don't really know. And look, I'm always in the favor of more information is best. Obviously, they were in the information business, but I think it would also help Garrett, where he's putting some film out there for scouts to look at. This is a guy who's certainly easily a potential first round draft pick next May, and he's putting some stuff out there that scouts got to be putting a big question mark next to his name right now. Yeah, well, and I think it's funny, it's ironic that the world was coming to an end and everyone was freaking out. I think it was August 5th that Garrett Nussmeier's got a torn ACL. That was the rumor on social media. He blew out his knee today at practice, and that's been nothing. And then another injury that I guess never was really discussed or brought up for the most part is what's hampering him. That whenever he did this to his abs or his whatever the case may be, but so the fans, the most popular person in town is the backup quarterback. So Michael Van Buren's name has been brought up by people on the internet. They need to play him. They need to take a look at him and this and that. The team is built around Garrett. Certainly the endorsements are built around Garrett. Garrett's on billboards all around town, and certainly Gordon McKernan ads, Raising Cane's ads, Our Lady of the Lake ads. I heard him on the radio, Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge. This is Garrett Nussmeier. So we don't think, obviously Garrett, we think is going to start against South Carolina and continue to play. But if you take him out of the game for any, whether it's, hey, you're a little too hurt, you're hurting the team, or you're not playing well, that's a huge move if they would ever do that. And it's a domino effect type thing, right?
Yes, and I don't think that's the case, and I don't think what his problems are enough to stop him from playing. Look, if he was really like really injured, like Miles Brennan in 2020 injured, right? You know, they wouldn't be playing him. You know, that wouldn't be the case. But and I don't think we're going to see anything like, you know, those of us who go way back with LSU. Remember LSU putting Mickey Guidry in for a
one
quarter,
series for Hodson.
One series for Hodson each half or each game and playing him. And this is the guy who, you know, was LSU's all-time leading passer for a long time. I think that, but
Still is.
he is, yes.
Yeah.
That was the touchdown passes I think Joe Burrow got.
Oh yeah. Well, the yardage.
The yardage. Yeah, over 9,000 yards passing.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind seeing. I think it would benefit them in the running game to see him in kind of the short yard situations where, you know, maybe it's, you know, 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 or something like that, and you put him in to, you know, give you the quarterback run. Why those plays are so effective, I'm still scratching my head sometimes, but they are.
Yeah.
And he's a runner, and he looked good against Southeastern, but he's not the long-term answer. That's not what you want for this offense. As you said, it's built around what Garrett and what he can do. Yeah. And but I think a package once in a while for Van Buren wouldn't be anything.
Kind of like they did with Perilou in 07, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
They put Perilou in to run, and I was like, well, I covered him in high school. He throws pretty well too. You know, he's not just a
there'd be a threat of throwing as well, but you know.
Yeah.
But you gotta be. But in general, they have to be more committed to the run. They have to. I saw Jacob Hester say something on his show that I thought was very interesting. He said there's a lot of RPOs with LSU's offense. Well, RPO means the offensive linemen have to wait and see is it going to be a pass or a run, because they can't release past the line of scrimmage, otherwise it's a penalty. Yeah. So they can't be as his assertion was, they can't be as physical or make that push against the defensive lineman, and that's hurting the game when it's true runs, and that they aren't using the power game. And look, the days of the fullback, the power eye and the fullback are over, but there's some things you can do around that with a tight end in the backfield, or even another offensive lineman or something like that, or the 12 personnel, as they call it, with 2 tight ends at the back. So there are some things you can do. I think LSU needs to be more committed. The general assertion, I think, is correct. LSU is not committed enough to the run. 2 carries in the first half against Ole Miss by the true running backs. Mm-hmm. Maybe Durham would have gotten a few more carries, but I don't think it would have been 8 more carries or something like that, Jock. So I think they've got to be more committed to the run and make it work until it works. Yeah.
You ever seen that cartoon where it's a guy, he's digging underground, and it says never give up, because eventually he walks away and he's got that much left. If he just would have kept digging, he's on the other side, right, of getting out or whatever. Right. That's kind of like the running game, right? They say, you have to bang your head up against the wall sometimes and have, 8 or 9 plays that don't go very far before you break the 10th that does make it very far. And running backs themselves will tell you, hey, I need 10 carries before, to get warm or to see things. And they don't have a guy that they've turned the ball, grabbed the ball and handed to 10 times. I mean, they don't really have nobody's really gotten warm. I mean, Caden, okay. But, I mean, Harlem Berry, he showed a little something late in the game. And Caleb Jackson, my goodness, 7 carries for 18 yards the entire season. And 10 of those came on a 3rd and 20 the other day against Ole Miss.
He's someone, yes, when they're just running and trying to get what they can get and punt. He's someone I think I would turn to. I know he hasn't looked anything like he did as his freshman year, when he looked kind of like Leonard Fournette light. But he's their most power back, and I think he's someone they could turn to. Look, this is not just this year, Jacques. This is a chronic thing or systemic thing in the Brian Kelly era. LSU's last running back who was a 1,000-yard rusher was Ty Davis Price in 2001. Yes, Jaden Daniels rushed for over 1,000 yards when he won the Heisman, but that was a great offense. But they didn't have anyone. I think Logan Diggs, who scored a touchdown for Ole Miss Saturday, he had 600-something yards that season. They didn't have any running back who's, and that's not the be-all end-all, a 1,000-yard rusher. These days, certainly that's less of a important or benchmark in football than it used to be, but it shows that they have not really had that bell cow back, that someone that they can really depend on for those tough yards, because you have to get those tough yards. As much as everyone talks about Lane Kiffin's offense and the space they created with the passing game and all this stuff, and they do. When they have to run the ball, they run the ball. They did it Saturday against LSU when LSU closed to 24-19, and they were able to run the clock out. It's what Steve Spurrier's fun and gun teams did back in the 90s and 2000s. Everybody talked about how innovative he was. That's true. But when they had to run the ball with Eric Rhett, they could run the ball. Yeah. And it's a necessary staple of football. Football hasn't changed that much. Still got to block and tackle and run, and LSU's not good at two of those things.
Yeah. And I think Matt Flynn, I listened to him on the radio, made a good point the other day about throwing these lateral passes to the wide receivers, these sideways where they catch. You're relying on wide receivers to block up front. And a lot of times those guys get called for holding because they're grabbing and, it's 1st and 20, to 2nd and 20. You don't want to get penalized that way as well. And so, look, Xavier Thomas has 14 carries. Barryon Brown has 3 carries. They slipped him in the other day. So they've been trying to run wide receivers. They've been practicing that since the spring.
And that's fine. That's fine.
The Kansas City Chiefs do that, right?
Sure. And I think that's innovative. We're talking about the Les Miles days of running the ball. They didn't do a whole lot of that kind of stuff. Let's run the jet sweep. Let's run the wide receiver. Bring him in. Bring him in as the back, and let's do something with him and make this. Got the defense guessing. Where's he going to go? What's he going to do? But this is to me. And it's, you hate to make too many generalizations, but it's a very horizontal looking offense. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of side to side stuff with the run, with the screens, with the short passes, instead of attacking down the middle of the field and attacking vertically. Obviously, it's not just one thing. Is it some of Joe Sloan's play calling and philosophy? Probably so. Is some of Garrett Nussmeier's issues? Certainly, you have to say that. But they've got to find a way to make it work somehow. And the best way to make it work is keep people from dropping 7-8 in the coverage is to be able to run the ball effectively, and they've got to be more committed to that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Is that it is a array of problems on the offensive side of the ball. People getting on Joe Sloan. I mean, he'll never say this publicly or whatever because he did his one press conference. We won't see him again for a long time. But he could say, "You want me to call plays? Well, give me an offensive line that can block somebody. You want me to run the ball into what? And and get nothing. And then I guess some of the other guys can say, "Hey, our quarterback can't get us the ball down the field as much as he should be able to," and makes a bad decision. Like you said, I agree that they're up 7-3. They could be up 14-3. You're playing from ahead with a great defense. Not a young quarterback, but a quarterback on Ole Miss's side who hasn't been in a big situation like this before in a game of this magnitude. So it's frustrating because you've got the defense playing the way you want for the most part, and offensively, there's nothing really you can point to say, hey, they really do that well, or we can hang our hat on that. Les Miles, they could run the ball. They would have a back, whether it was Stephen Ridley, Jeremy Hill, Spencer Ware, whoever, Fournette, Geis, they could run the ball for the most part.
And the importance of it, going back to 2019, Joe Burrow threw for a million yards and 60 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns per game. Amazing. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was also a 1,000-yard rusher. There was that threat. And there's a threat of Joe running, too. Now, you're not going to get that with Garrett, and that's fine. That's just not the kind of player he is. I know he took off and ran for 26 yards earlier this season, I guess, against Southeastern. But he's not that guy, and that's okay. But he's not quite the statue that Zach Mettenberger was either back in the early 2010s. But so you're not going to have that threat. Certainly not going to be Jaden Daniels. But you gotta they've just got to be more well-rounded as an offense. And as you said, it's hard to point to any one thing they're doing well. I've had to pick something. I would say it is Xavier Thomas, I think, has been a bright spot. He's been all over the place, catching the ball, running the ball. He's been very effective, and Barryon Brown has as well, but not to the degree that I thought he would be. And they've had injuries, they've had problems. 5 new starters on the offensive line. This is one area that can improve, though. Offensive lines can get better over the course of the year. More chemistry, more counting on each other, and knowing their moves and what they're going to do. And maybe a Karius Kern, who I thought looked pretty good at times in the game Saturday. The freshman had stuck in there at right tackle because of the injury to Weston Davis, and I thought he showed some real good flashes. Just laid on this guy one time. He was trying to rush Nussmeier and just laid on top of him. That's what you want to see in an offensive lineman. So there's an opportunity for them to break out and to get better, but it's a multitude of issues. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. Well, I brought this up. Brad Davis, their positions coach, he was a national championship offensive lineman for the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, that's granted, it's been 25 years ago. But you see him at practice next to these guys, and he is tiny. I mean, the modern-day offensive line, and it because they're small. These guys, if they're having trouble blocking, they're 6'7", 6'8", 6'5", 350. I mean, they're big guys, Right. It's just what's going wrong there. And everyone likes Brad Davis, and he's recruited very well. And but if this continues, it's something they got to look at the end of the year and say, what's the problem with running the football in our offensive line? Because they had 4 guys get drafted last year, and they couldn't run it last year either.
That's the point that makes you have to point towards coaching. I say this, something's getting lost in translation, or or they're not picking up what he's saying, or he's not telling the right things. And I've had a lot of respect for Brad Davis too. They stuck him in the interim position when Orgeron left to have to coach the Texas Bowl, and was kind of a no-win situation. But he did a good job, and it was the one. I think the one holdover from from the staff that Kelly kept when he arrived for the 2022 season. So, but Brian's not been averse to mid-season changes. Don't seem to be his MO. I think obviously there's a lot of speculation. Would he take the play calling duties away from Joe Sloan? Obviously, we've seen Brian be a very CEO kind of coach and say, this is the guy I want in this position, and I'm delegating this to you. You handle it. Maybe sometimes a little too much. One thing, I don't know if it struck you, Jacques, after the game, talking about the running backs, and he said, well, Frank Wilson, LSU's running backs coach, who's very good recruiter. He likes to go with the guy with a hot hand, and that's what Frank likes to do. I'm thinking, what do you want to do? You're the head coach. Yeah. You can say, give it to this guy, or let's do more of this. And I wonder. I've always wondered under Kelly how much of that is going on. He's an offensive guy by experience, so he's not a defensive coach like Kirby Smart's a defensive coach. So I think he has given a lot of autonomy to first Matt House and now Blake Baker, and I think Blake Baker's done a very good job. But offensively, I wonder sometimes, unless it's saying let's go for it on 4th down or not, what is he contributing? What is he advising them to do? Yeah. And I think with the offensive line, he could get a little more in there, and I think we're not going to practice anymore, but he could get in there a little bit more hands on and try to do some things, because try to get a spark going, because obviously they need it.
Well, they got this bye week, and then it's straight into the gauntlet. You're playing South Carolina at home. You go to Vanderbilt. I know you go on Jimmy Ott and Charles Hannegriff's show, and Hannegriff's been saying that Gordy's been talking about that 11 a.m. kickoff at Vanderbilt for months now, and how tricky a spot it is in between South Carolina and Texas A&M coming to Tiger Stadium, an open date. And we seem to always do this with Alabama, whether they win their first game or not. Oh, they didn't look very good, Oh, yeah, and then by the time LSU plays them in November, they're a completely different team, and that's the way it's trending right now with Ty Simpson, the way he's throwing the football. They go to Georgia and win.
Who they always beat as well.
The Boars 2-0 against Georgia,
right.
Despite all the people upset.
That's
right. If you listen to Paul Feinbaum's show on Labor Day, we want this guy out of town, get him out. The guy that was going to be, brave enough or stupid enough to follow Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa, coming in, the Ray Perkins, so to speak, of the modern era. But they face a gauntlet of games. There's no really game you can look at until they play Western Kentucky and say, oh, yeah, we're definitely winning today. I mean, and you can just feel there's a lot of pressure, right? I mean, there's always a lot of pressure over here. But now, like you've written about many times, $18 million at least invested into the roster. Kelly's in his 4th year. People are tired of hearing in the post-game press conferences, we got to coach better, we got to do better. There's nothing a coach can say after a loss that's going to make anybody feel better.
That's right.
They say, why don't you ask this? And then I ask it, well, what do you think he was going to say? So you can't win for losing.
That's right.
So, I mean, I remember, at Paul Maneri's last year when they started 1-8 in the SEC, people furious and mad and blah, blah, blah. So he's not at that level, but there is a bit of a kind of he's had at least 3 losses, right? These 3 losses, all 3 of his first years here. He did a lot better than what Orgeron was doing at the end in those last 2 years, but they haven't broken through yet. And if they don't break free, this year, and he's got 6 years left on a contract. No one's talking about firing Brian Kelly, but I think a portion of your fans are going to fire the head coach this year if they don't, make a playoff.
Yeah, I mean, they've been, Brian brought it up on his radio show before the start of the season. How much, as you said, $18 million to try to attract and retain players for this team. He says, "I like this team. and I think they are a talented team. I think they are.
It's our best roster. He said that multiple times.
But and one loss to Ole Miss. Like no one's getting through the SEC unscathed. No one. I know Vanderbilt's flying high in there 5-0. God, they got a lot of tough games left. Oklahoma's undefeated. They got a lot of tough games left. Texas has already lost a non-conference game. Alabama's already lost a non-conference game. No one's getting through the season unbeaten. So one loss to Ole Miss doesn't doom you, especially in the era of a 12-team playoff. That said, all these road games are very losable. I know they got Texas A&M at home, and South Carolina is good, and Arkansas just changed coaches, Bobby Petrino, but they still got stuck with a terrible personnel on defense. I think LSU is gonna win, gonna hold serve at home and win the rest of their games at home. I really expect that they will. Again, those are some tough games. But the road games are surprisingly difficult. I remember in 2006 they played 4 top 10 teams on the road and they split those games. It was a really good LSU team. In this era they would definitely be a playoff team and would be a team that you.
What year again? I'm sorry.
06.
Yeah.
With when they won the road to Florida and they lost. But they beat Tennessee on the road and they had 2 other top 10 teams they played, and it was a really different schedule. This is probably the most difficult road schedule since then. All these teams are ranked right now. Even Vandy is number 16 in the country, going into their game with Alabama this week. So it's tough, and you've got to. So you lost one game, it's not the end of the world. And a 9-3 SEC team could slip into the playoff. It's not impossible to say in a 12-team playoff. It's not a 4-team playoff anymore. But you can't count on that. You have to expect that you got to win 2 of the, hold serve at home and win 2 of those last 3 on the road. And none of them are going to be easy at this point. Now, Oklahoma right now is without John Mateer. He broke a bone in his hand. He's out right now, but he's expected to be back by the time LSU plays them at the end of the season. It's going to be cold, and you have to expect bad weather, in Oklahoma at the end of November.
Right after Thanksgiving and all that.
Yeah, so it's daunting. The challenge is daunting, and if LSU, to circle back around to what you said, doesn't make the playoff this year, how are they gonna? I've been asking this question, Jacques. How are they going to sustain this to begin with the boosters and people donating all this money? If people are you ask people to be all in this year, and if you don't at least make the playoff, much less win the national championship, but at least make the playoff, how are you going to get people to be all in again? In the future? This is a really watershed time for Brian Kelly. No, I don't think he's getting fired this year. I think next year, if they don't make the playoff, he'd be on more of a hot seat.
They'll only owe $50 million after next year, as opposed to $60 million after this year.
That's right. It's a staggering amount of money, and the schools are more averse to spending that kind of money now on buyouts and saying, let's try to help you find more players, to get players, through the transfer portal and retain players. But this is where we all wondered, how is LSU going to be this year? Okay, they went all in, they shoved all their chips in the middle of the table. Is it going to pay off? And they beat Clemson on the road, and you're like,
got the monkey off their back in the season opener.
Yeah, that's
and all
right.
That.
This is they're on their way, and then turns out Clemson is struggling mightily. So it's the story. I guess in to sum up, the story of the season has yet to be completely written. People want to say after one game, this is how it's going to be the rest of the year. And teams get better, they get worse. You reanalyze the opponents they played. Florida looked like such a dangerous game, and it was. But they're having their problems, and DJ Lagway is not the quarterback we thought he was. He's no Diego Pavia, as it turns out, or Trinidad Chambliss, as it turns out.
Yeah.
So it's it is a lot to be written with 7 games left. But boy, it's challenging. It's definitely challenging, as it is for a lot of teams in the SEC. But LSU, I still believe, has the ability to make the playoff, but some things have got to get better between now and then. And it's got to get better against South Carolina, because Vanderbilt, as strange as it sounds to say, is an even bigger challenge on the road the week after.
Yeah. Well, it's like Florida State going into the year. They were 2-10 last year. They beat Alabama. They get on the roll. Oh, these guys are really good. Then they go to Virginia. They slip up. So it's just, when you start comparing scores and trying to predict, I mean, you're going to crap out. I think
It's a fool's errand.
It's a Will Wade used that fool's errand. I think that was one of the first times I had heard that or whatever. But good old Will Wade. He had a few sayings. We play an arena, not a gym. You know, the NIT press conference against the Cajuns is an all timer for sure.
That was an all timer, man. That was as heated as the NIT can get, I think.
Exactly. It's like, well, most national people, they yawn at the NIT, but this one's pretty good. You know, this is what we need. Heading down the stretch here, just some other thoughts on the team before we let you go here. Defense, obviously. Blake Baker, people that I talked to, no doubt he's going to be a head coach. Just a matter of when. His family's very happy here. His wife played soccer at LSU, so they got the job they wanted in 2021. Coach O goes bye-bye, and so does Blake Baker, and comes back, gets a better position, and his team playing very side the ball playing, intercepting passes too.
Yes, yeah. And obviously they had the pick six that was called back by DJ Pickett, but obviously he's got a tremendous upside. The thing with Blake Baker is how long can you hold on to him? Well, everyone speculates, will John Summerall, the Tulane coach, leave after this year? Blake played at Tulane. Is that a job that would appeal to him? It'd be a first head coaching job. Anything's possible, but that was a good hire. And look, you certainly can't say everything's been bad under Brian Kelly. I mean, look, people were like, Brian Kelly or Billy Napier. Remember all that talk? Well, Billy Napier's done all this, and Brian Kelly's, he never won the big one. And, Napier's bound to get fired this year. So, it hasn't been terrible at all under Kelly. Heisman winner, went to the SEC championship game his first year, won, averaging, close to 10 wins a year, won all their bowl games for what that's worth in this modern era. But it hasn't been super great either, and it's time to be great, and you're still wondering if they're in a position right now to be great. But as I said, the complete story of the season is not written yet.
Yeah. Well, I made the comparison before the season started. We live in much different times, obviously, but 30 years apart. But Jerry DiNardo's first 3 years and Brian Kelly's first 3 years are pretty much identical in terms of wins and losses. They were both 3-0 in bowl games, and DiNardo was extremely popular after 3 years because he was coming off of 6 straight losing seasons, right. And no one had really won a national championship except for Dietzel way back in the late 50s. Kelly comes in off the heels of 3 national championships in a relatively short period of time, although 20-some-odd years, a couple of decades, but still one just in 2019.
Only Alabama's won more in that time period, so, yeah, pretty darn good.
Yeah, right. And then his salary. He's getting paid $10 million a year. I don't know what DiNardo's top salary was, $400,000, $500,000 maybe. back then. I still remember when Mike Archer got fired, he was crying, and my dad and I were watching on TV, and my dad said, "Poor guy." And then now, coach gets fired. No one's saying, "Poor guy." No one's feeling sorry for any major coach who's getting axed.
No, Ed Orgeron gets $17 million. His wife gets half. He's still got over $8 million and a few dollars that he made in the bank. Did you see him at the Ryder Cup, by the way, firing?
I did. I
had no idea Ed cared about golf at all. That was something. As a golf guy, I thought it was kind of cool.
No, he's having a great time. He's leading USA chants and all that. Never seen him swing a golf club. I don't think he's done that. I think he's going to be. Patrick Queen is getting a stadium named after him tonight, the former Livonia star, and I think the defensive MVP of the 2019 national championship. And I think Orgeron's going to be there, from what I've been told. So
let me say this about Brian Kelly. Like, he had a lot of success. 2 national championships at Grand Valley State. I know that's a lower level, like Ferris State, where Trinidad Chambliss played Division II, and then he won at Cincinnati, and he won at Notre Dame, and this guy's going in the College Football Hall of Fame. This guy is one of the all-time Hall of Fame coach. If he retired today, he would be in the Hall of Fame in however many years you got to set out to do that. Are there still questions about him, getting over the top and never won a national championship, made the playoffs at Notre Dame, lost to Alabama in the national championship game the year after Alabama beat LSU, and with the Manti Te'o team and everything. But you gotta let this play out. And look, LSU as you said with the contract, 10 years, $100 million. They're just not even to the halfway point of that. They virtually have no choice. To me, financially. I mean, This was a Herculean effort to scrape together the $18 million to help build this roster, much less what you have to pay him and assistant coaches. These guys get tons of money now. I mean, it's quaint to think LSU paid Nick Saban $1.3 million back in the day to get him from Michigan State. Blake Baker makes he's making $2.5 million, and he's got a 3-year contract and stuff like that. So
and then you got to hire the next guy.
That's right, and hire more people. So it's not as easy as people think. So. You have no choice but to stay the course if you're an LSU fan and hope that the things work out, and they can. But it could also be, I could see this team going 7-5 or 8-4 as well. I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, we love covering LSU football. It's a lot of fun and everything, but I don't want to use the word gross, but just all the money and all the pressure and everything. It's getting to be too much, Scott. It's just too much.
I don't know if he actually said it, but there was a line in the movie about Bobby Jones. Jim Caviezel played Bobby Jones, Stroke of Genius, and Malcolm McDowell plays the sports writer O.B. Keeler, who was his good friend. And he says, because Bobby Jones was an amateur, right, his whole competitive career. He says, money, it's going to ruin sports. And this is 1930, when he said, if he actually said it, but even if he didn't, how true that is to me, how true that is. It's totally off topic, Jacques, but they're doing all this revenue sharing with the players now. No one has said, why can't they all get together in college sports and say, we're going to have a salary cap, basically, like they do in pro sports. We're going to share $22 million, max with these kids, and that's it. There's no side deals, nothing. And if you are, there's got to be some czar of college football who comes down and says, that's illegal. You can't do that. Why can't they agree to do that? Because it's just, to me, what they're doing is unsustainable for LSU, for anybody.
Yeah. Well, the Gordon McKernans and the people that have supported it have told me that from get-go. This is not sustainable. It won't last. And to me, it always has just ripped away at the fabric of team. I had no athletic career, I'll tell you that. But I was on the North Vermilion basketball team, and the coach scheduled practice the day of the Super Bowl in 1992 or 3. And for once in my life, I was rebellious, and I didn't go to practice. I'm not going to practice during the Super Bowl. Well, anyway, I had to run suicides and all this stuff, and I was a bench warmer nobody, okay? That was team, to think that guys on teams would not play in games and I'm not showing up, or we're out of the race now, so I'm not going to try as hard and all that. This is not good, just in my opinion.
No, and if LSU doesn't make the playoff and they go to the ReliaQuest Bowl again, as I saw one projection for them, how many of these guys are going to opt out of that game? A lot. A lot of guys. I know it's going to be like the Texas Bowl, a few years ago, but it's going to be a lot. Like I did see something. We had a story today in the paper about an incremental improvement that they go into a single transfer portal window. Mm-hmm. It was going to be, right after the start of the year. I think that's great. That's certainly something Brian Kelly has supported, and he's more knowledgeable about these things than I am or you are, and what it means for them and what they need. But that's a sane move. Let's have more sane moves. Let's say you can only transfer once, and then you got to sit out a year like you used to. Yeah. You can't transfer 3 times, and so it's all. I hate to say the inmates are running the asylum, because I think that's unfair to college athletes.
You can't say anything like that anymore.
But you got to say, but it has certainly shifted in a way that I don't think you or I could have foreseen even 10 years ago. Since LSU won the national championship with Joe Burrow, how much has changed in college athletics? The transfer portal and NIL and teams moving around and conferences, like the Pac-12 doesn't really exist anymore, and rivalries. I heard, if I may, Joe Castiglione, because this pertained to LSU scheduling, the outgoing AD at Oklahoma, they're not playing Oklahoma State anymore. He said, the way our schedule is set up, I can't see us playing till the late 2030s. That's a shame to me. I've never been to a Bedlam series game, but they used to play everywhere, and in-state rivals, and that's a real shame. Washington State, they're split up now, and Stanford's going to North Carolina to play a conference game. I mean, in the ACC, it's just crazy, and we have torn away the. Do the athletes deserve something? Yes. Everybody's been making money hand over fist except for them. But we've lost something. The fabric of college athletics has been torn in a lot of places, and it's a shame. And I wonder sometimes if people are going to wake up 20 years from now and go, what have we done to college athletics? Yeah. And we're going to lose sports too. The teams are going to more schools are going to get rid of Olympic sports teams because we just can't afford it.
Can't afford them. Yeah. Well, it's like going to LSU men's basketball practice there today, first practice. I mean, there's like 2 guys from last year's team. The whole team's new. And then after this year ends, they're all going to go away. We're going to get some more together. And,
That's right.
They might make an NIT, or something. We'll see what happens this year. Hopefully they do better at that. Hopefully they make the tournament. I don't know what's going to happen. But the days of, senior day with Ricky Blanton, guys like that, Moscona, like, you saw an old jock. Okay, I know, I do. Okay, but let me hang on to some of that stuff. But, hey, you got senior day now with guys who've been on campus 6 months. And
Sure.
It's the new, it's the rules of engagement, as Will Wade said.
And you and I are in this all the time. We're dealing with this all the time. With the people watching or the people reading us, the Advocate, like, how hard is it for the average fan who loves LSU or loves whatever college team they love to wrap their arms around it? And it's a dizzying amount of change that has happened in the last 6 years or so, and especially let's go back to COVID with a pandemic. That's probably, I think, when things started really changing a lot. Went on fast forward. It's got to be disheartening, disillusioning, confusing to the average fan who just wants to love their team and follow these guys and wear their jerseys and support them. And it's like, well, I was wearing his jersey, but now he's gone. It's the next week, and he's gone to another school.
Well, in 2019, we kind of talked about sometimes maybe it was the last of its kind, because that LSU team, can you imagine trying to pay that team these days? Jefferson, Burrow, Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Patrick Queen, all the people that have made it to the NFL, trying to pay all those guys. And then you had COVID, and after that, things really started to change. And so that's what my dad always said, a real simple saying. Just remember, boy, things change. So.
Oh, it always does change, but it's just been on fast forward.
Well, it's ironic because they never change. For years, they wouldn't change anything.
Yes.
Right? They were very stubborn about, we're not going to have a playoff, and we have bowls. And, then they finally moved to the BCS. Then they finally moved to a 14 playoff. Now we got 12, and people think it's a matter of time before they go 16.
I think we will see that next year, 14 or 16 teams in a playoff, yeah.
Yeah, and then because your regular season used to be the one thing, the one regular season that you felt like, every game really, really mattered. Now not as much, but I guess that's good.
Yeah, and you could say, if you really look at it from the bigger picture, you could say that LSU lost to Ole Miss is the pain of it, the penalty of it is somewhat diminished now in the 12-team playoff. Like I said, if they can run the table the rest of the way, which they can win, as stuff we said the schedule is and the problems they have, they can win any game that's remaining on their schedule.
Yeah.
I don't think it's there's no game you say, they can't win that one. It's like 1994 when they went to Florida or something like that. They can't win that game. This is very different. So, but it's kind of diminished a little bit that the regular season, because it's a playoff now. It's a different era, and that's fine. That's what everyone has clamored for. But I've always liked the uniqueness of college football. With the bowls and the bowls and the polls and this and that. It's always been. It just seems more now, Jacques. I don't know if it seems to you like the NFL light. It just seems that we're getting more and more towards it's a. Not even semi-pro, sport, but it's amateurism is long gone, and it's changed so much, and there's still the bands, and there's still the campuses, and the old great old stadiums, and the rivalries, and by the way, I think the SEC did a very good job of maintaining a lot of these really good rivalries in the SEC. The fact that LSU and Ole Miss will play every year is very good. They can't play Alabama every year. Alabama's already got two tough opponents, Auburn and Tennessee. So that wasn't surprising. They're not going to play that one anymore. But I think there's been a lot that has been eroded from college sports the last few years, and I think I wonder if we're all going to wake up one day and say, "Man, this is not what it needs to be."
Yeah. Well, to end, one of the big differences that still remains is you can go to a place like Clemson, which is less than 20,000 people, I believe, and you're just driving in the woods, and then you get to a lake and a pretty little place, and then there's an 81,000 seat stadium there. That's something that's really unique to college football. The fact that you still can kind of tailgate under trees, and NFL you're kind of in concrete and buildings and noise, and college you still have that kind of quaintness to it to an extent. But it's becoming more and more professional, and that's
logos on the field. We're gonna see logos on jerseys pretty soon in college sports. We're going to see that too.
Ricky Bobby, huh? He's got a
Wonder Bread.
that NASCAR. Scott, thanks for stopping by.
Jock, always a pleasure.
Good
Thanks
seeing
for
you.
having me.
And, of course, NOLA.com, right?
TheAdvocate.com, NOLA.com, basically all the same content, sure.
And your books. Tell me about your books.
Well, I wrote The Fighting Tigers, kind of a sequel to Peter Finney's book. Then I wrote the LSU by the Numbers, like the best player who wore each number. And then the book that came out last year was the 100 Years in Death Valley, the Death Valley. You got to say it. LSU's beat them every time except one, Clemson. So, about the first 100 years of Tiger Stadium and a lot of the history and everything. And so those are all still out there. So, you check them out.
All right, it's the beginning of October. This is actually the perfect time to Christmas shop right now. Get your stocking stuffers for your LSU fans. So certainly in the wintertime, if you want a nice book, right, to read next to the fire, get one of Scott's books.
I like to think so. Yeah.
And then I'm going to write a book about 1992, the year the Tigers went 2-9 and had nobody drafted, right? Nobody drafted off that team.
I couldn't imagine that first year I covered LSU. I couldn't imagine LSU was that bad. It never occurred to me they could be this bad.
They beat Mississippi State early, and they beat
Tulane
late.
That was it.
And they lost everything else. That was the year that they lost to Alabama at home, and they had the biggest crowd of the year, but it was like all red. I think Alabama took over Tiger Stadium that year.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I wanted to end there. But, Scott, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for
stopping by Jacques Talk. We'll see you later on.